should be paying for it.
John Ruscombe, nothing in this policy, though, actually would deter companies from hiring women specifically, though, would it? Is that a fear that you have?
No, not necessarily. Look, Scott's right, we're in 2010 and we have to look forward to the future, and companies want to get the best employees possible, regardless of their gender, race or background or anything else. So it's not so much a question of a deterrence to employment, it's a question of a deterrence to growth. Now, both sides of politics can't keep on seeing business as a honeypot to fund whatever scheme they like. Parent leave is important, but so is carers leave, so is study leave, so are many of the other sorts of leave that employees want to take. And we just can't have a situation whereby big business has to foot the bill every time, because ultimately, if big business is paying more in tax, it's less in dividends to the mum and dad shareholders, it's less in wages, and ultimately, it's less jobs.
Scott, are you surprised that Liberal Party Room actually went along with this plan today and endorsed it as policy? I would assume that this is the sort of plan that wouldn't have gone down very well with a lot of Liberal MPs and senators.
Look, I think Tony Abbott's team at large is understanding that indeed we have to move forward, and certainly as an advocate and a very staunch advocate as I am of the small business sector in this country, I'm very pleased that Tony Abbott's team has actually come to the understanding that this is a very positive direction for this particular piece of social policy to be going. Look, and I think just to take up on what John was saying, that in some way this is going to be a disadvantage to business. Let's talk about continuity of service. Let's talk about positive contributions, that a scheme of any kind that will actually keep people in the workforce rather than having to take time off indefinitely in a way that is non-commercial, so to speak, so that John sort of understands this, non-commercial, it's not something that's actually good for business. This plan that is going to be funded somehow, and in this case the policy of the coalition would say that 1.7% would be a levy on those big businesses that have a profit above and beyond $5 million a year. I think that's actually segmenting an area of the economy that has the capacity to fund this well and truly.
I do want to just have a look at the politics of this. Of course, Tony Abbott has been deemed to have problems with women voters. I don't think we've actually seen that play out in the polls yet, but of course his conservative views are well known. John Ruscombe, do you think that this idea will be a vote winner, regardless of whether or not you think it's the right thing to do? Do you acknowledge that this very generous plan will be very attractive to a lot of women across the country?
Oh, look, it might be attractive, but I think there's another issue involved in the politics, which is Tony Abbott campaigned against the ETS on the basis it was a great big tax, and it is a tax. Now, at the same time as he's campaigning against Kevin Rudd's ETS tax, he's proposing another tax on big business. So it's not just a question of women or men or families, it's a question of another tax. And the Liberal Party, I would argue, and I speak as a Liberal Party member, should be standing up for less tax, less regulation, not these extra burdens on business.
Scott Driscoll, John has a very good point there. Tony Abbott is certainly opening himself wide up to the government using that line we've heard so often from the coalition in recent weeks and months that, about a big, great new tax. This is a broken promise from Tony Abbott, isn't it?
Look, I'd just say to John and to those out there that want to go down that path, it's a dangerous path to go. We're talking about an ETS tax, trying to compare that to something of paid parental leave. Let's just get real about this. An ETS tax was a tax on something that was invisible, that was going to achieve nothing but a big slush fund of money to be distributed by the government of the day of either persuasion in a way that was unknown to the taxpayers that contributed to it. We're not talking about that. What we're talking about is a concept of parents being able to look after kids and take a little bit of time off and being able to afford to look after kids in the workforce, going out of the workforce for 6 months and not having economic hardship bestowed upon them. I think, in the words of the Prime Minister, this is getting back to basics.
Scott, do you though think that it is going to be a vote winner when you look at mums and dads at home looking at this policy? Do you think it is something that is going to be seriously attractive?
Well, I think if you're talking about votes, I think you need to let the voters of Australia determine that. I think they need to have a look and see whether or not this is a policy that is going to benefit them. I think we need to look at the broad base of small businesses across Australia, and they'll add up this proposal and realise that this is probably something that they support absolutely adamantly as an alternative to a broad-based taxation proposal that John seemingly would prefer as to be policy after the next election. Now, I think we need to get back to the point. There will be a government-funded parental leave scheme after the next election. There's no denying it. There's no running away from it. John needs to understand that this is not going to be a situation that he can explain away. It will be real. Now, let's talk about who can afford it, and that's big business.
John, as a Liberal member, how do you think the voters will take Tony Abbott changing his stripes, not just on the issue of a paid parental scheme and the benefits of it, but also on the promise that Tony Abbott did make? I think it was a couple of months ago that under him there would be no new taxes, and now he is. Is he going to be losing a lot of credibility, do you think?
Oh, look, voters are going to make up their own mind, and they'll listen to the arguments, and they'll compare Tony Abbott's scheme to the scheme of the Prime Minister. But the question for Australians is, as we slowly recover from the GFC, what is going to be the best way to get growth? And the way to get growth is not to impose another levy on big business. And the point that I think many people are going to question is, why are people in medium-sized businesses, because they'll be covered by this levy, why are they going to be paying for someone perhaps on $150,000 a year to take 6 months off at $75,000 a year? Now, that's not the welfare system that I understand. The welfare system is about supporting those in need and providing a social safety net. It is not about accommodating people on relatively large incomes to make a family choice in this way. And if we're talking about where our taxes are going to go, I think there are many other ways of spending taxes rather than this scheme. But as Scott says, ultimately the voters are going to decide.
Scott Driscoll and John Rossum, thank you so much for your time on Playing Politics today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Pleasure, thank you.